Hi everyone, welcome back to the official podcast of Whitby Public Library, Doorway to Discovery. Today we have two special guests on from the library. We're super excited to introduce them, and we're going to be talking about all things queer in the library. I'm Ashlyn. My pronouns are she or they, and I work in community engagement at the library.
My name is Bria. I use she, her pronouns, and I work in borrower services at the library.
My name is Kate. I use she, her pronouns, and I still work at the Brooklyn branch.
I'm Shelby. My pronouns are she, her, and I also work at the Brooklyn branch.
Hi, my name is Melanie. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a reference assistant at the Central Library.
So we might as well get into it. I thought we could start by talking about what we're currently doing at the library for queer inclusive programs and services. Okay, I can jump in with something that we actually did 2 summers ago when I was last in person at the library with Melanie when we made those sick Pride bookmarks. And Melanie was kind of the compiler of all the lists. She found so many great books. But we pretty much just put together a list of books, that were like queer inclusive for all different ages. So, picture books. There are so many great picture books, and there's more than just "and Tango makes 3." That's not the only gay picture book. There's a lot without animals, and I think it's really cool to show representation that's not just animals, because it really sends a different message when you see yourself in a book and it's a penguin, and when you see yourself in a book and it's like a human being.
You're still
just
othered.
To be blunt. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, 100%. So that was one thing. I wasn't here when we did the drag queen story time, but does anyone want to talk about how that went?
There were like hundreds of people. There's like 100 people. It was really cool to see. I almost cried.
So was it a local drag queen or?
Toronto.
I
believe they're from Toronto.
It's Toronto, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
It came from Toronto. It was an initiative started by the Toronto Public Library.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it, I think, on social media, but this is before I even started working at that library. So I remember seeing photos on all of our iPads, and I was like, there's a drag queen story time, and I missed it. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, I mean, drag queen story times are amazing because you get the visibility, right? But then drag queens are just such phenomenal performers. Like, I'm a huge fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm sorry, I am, but I'm not going to apologize. It's fantastic. And some of the most amazing performers come out of drag, I swear. Like, there's something so special about that art form to me that is so beautiful too. Like, I'm obsessed. I'm fully obsessed. Like, I've never actually been to a drag show, but I've watched a lot of drag queens on TV, and I'd be so happy to see them perform. So I couldn't imagine like doing a story time. Like, I guess not everybody here has done story times, I'm guessing. But it takes a lot of energy and a lot of ability to kind of perform, right? And to see a drag queen do it would be like master level.
Who they are and sharing that with everyone. And that's just something a lot of people don't have, at least from such a young age.
And I feel like it's so important to show little kids that, like, to just have kids experience so many different forms of entertainment. And like, I used to go to the Glad Day bookshop / cafe
Me too.
in Toronto.
I
loved it there. Oh my God, it was amazing.
I love it there.
It's awesome. And there I used to be friends with a girl in Toronto that had a daughter. And we went to the drag queen brunch one time at Glad Day, and like, kids, they've got no prejudice yet, right? They're just like there to have a good time. And we got to take home coloring sheets that were the drag queen coloring sheets, and like, it's so nice to just normalize queer content and queer performance for little kids, I think. And it's an important part of early literacy skills, is learning how to understand different perspectives from your own, or seeing yourself represented. And then, it opens up the possibilities, I think.
Also, the fact that, like, for a lot of the kids that go to that, it's probably, I don't know these days, but like, for some, it's probably at least their first entrance into seeing any kind of queer culture in such a positive way. And seeing it nice and like happy, and not instantly someone died. Like, So
Exactly.
I mean, compared to like us growing up, like the first interaction with queer culture, it happened very probably maybe later in life. Like it wasn't popularized like today, where I'm sorry, my cat is literally attacking my back. I'm so sorry.
kittens ran.
Like it's a good positive way for kids to interact with it, and it happens so much younger, and for us to have it readily available in Durham region and not Toronto, right? Because people who grew up in Toronto and live in Toronto have a lot more access to those things, where in Whitby, I mean, there's really not that many places for drag queens to even perform. So what a great way to have an entrance into the community in a safe way that is story time at your local library, right? Like there's not as much risk also for the performer because it is a library setting. You're there just for the kids. Like, yeah, I almost feel like it's a good way to kind of enter into this world and feel safe to do it too, right? Because I know a lot of people, like, you don't know what you're going to get when you come into a new town, right? Especially a smaller one who historically has a lot of a big white demographic, right? Not necessarily today, but historically it had. And I can't imagine it being easy. And I don't know how easy it was to even get it as a program at our library. Like it would be nice to have somebody here who maybe knew a little bit more about that process too, because I can't imagine that change in the community, like it's brought about by places like libraries having it, right?
And I can't speak to the drag queen story time specifically, but 2 summers ago, we got to go to Youth Pride Durham. So we being me and one of my coworkers, and it was a lot of fun because it was just kind of it was hidden. So it was behind one of the high schools in Whitby, and it was really nice because it wasn't, you were able to find it, but it wasn't like out there, because in high school, I don't know, I can put myself back in my shoes and think how terrified I was at the thought of, I mean, Kate and I went to the same high school. It wasn't a place where I felt safe. So I think it's really, really important that they had that. But it was so sweet seeing all these kids come up and like they were all wearing pride shirts and they were, I don't know, just so proud of who they were and they felt so comfortable. And it was the sweetest thing ever. They would come up and we had forums there so they could tell us books that they wanted to see at the library, because a lot of the times it's hard to find queer books. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. As a 12-year-old walking through the library, like desperately looking for the 10 queer books I knew existed and not finding any of them. So it was really great to see that. But then they did a drag performance at the end of it in the school gym, and it was just the sweetest thing. It was adorable. It was probably 4 p.m. in the middle of the summer, but they put all the lights down and they were just like dancing in the middle of the gym. It was amazing. I wish you all could have been there. But yeah, so it was cool that our library got to be a part of that. Other libraries in Durham were a part of that. And just, it's so important to, not just say that you are like queer positive, but also to take actions to show that you are, because those really mean a lot.
Well, and going off of what you're just saying about finding queer books in the library, I know we recently just did a diversity audit of our entire collection to see kind of where we were sitting, like what's used the most in story times, what's being added to our collection. And that's a big part of it too, is finding the books and getting them ordered. And I know that you guys, we have the ability to send a message or an email to the person who does all of our ordering to be like, hey, this looks like a great book, like you should definitely add it. And I think a lot of that comes from people who are identify as queer, or come from the community being like, you need this material in this library. And I remember actually reading this article about it not just being about having the content visibility, but also teaching children and teenagers about like safety too, like within relationships, and showcasing positive relationships that are healthy. At the end of the day, like people come to us for information, and maybe they don't feel comfortable asking, a librarian or library staff, but to know that they're there and to show you good positive relationships is just as important, because they could be coming from a heavily religious family who don't want to talk about it, who aren't going to give them good pointers on how to have relationships, right, and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was really interesting because I think the article specifically talked about young adults and like essentially like losing your virginity in the stacks, was the topic, and being able to visibly see your relationship and not have it based upon somebody else's. And I think today we're getting a lot more representation in our books, and we're getting a lot better ways of showing our relationships and how that works. That's in a happy manner, because I know a lot of times they end up being like sad or bad in some way, and to have those positive books are just as important to teach our teenagers and our young adults like how to have safe, healthy relationships too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just like with the, experience of finding these things and like learning about yourself through the library, I'm wondering if people want to go around and maybe say like the first book that they encountered in the library that was like, like queer or spoke to them.
I didn't encounter it in a library. I encountered it in a chat,
Oh,
to be fair.
okay. Well, you could say that too.
Yeah. So it's very interesting looking at current queer culture books compared to like the very first book I ever touched. So the first one that I ever read is called The Bermuda's Triangle by Maureen Johnson. Now I probably wouldn't, it's been a few years since I read it again. I wouldn't recommend it these days just because it's one of those love triangle things and it's a little outdated. It's from 2004. But I remember getting this book and it was the summer and I was just like holding it and I just stare at it and be like, what is this? And I didn't understand why I was so enwrapped in the book. So like at the time I wasn't comfortable with myself in that way. So I sat there and just kept rereading it and I was like, this is a really good book. Why is this a really good book? I really like this book. And I kind of just tried to like share it with everyone at the time. I was like, come here. So yeah, Bermuda's Triangle.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. I still have it for sure.
Yeah, you have to keep those first ones. They're so important. Even if they don't age well, there's still something really like touching about those ones.
You still have like the initial feelings they brought out.
Exactly.
Well, so I just recommended this one to Ashlyn. And so one book that I think it was actually much later in my life, but it was the first queer book or the first female book that really spoke to me, that made me feel like, oh, I felt those feelings. I understand that. And it was Juliet Takes a Breath. And I had tried a lot of queer fiction before, and it never really spoke to me in the right way. It was often just like I felt with female relationships, or just a lesbian character or a bi character that was that identified as a woman. It was just like it was always too sad, or there was something like, I feel like often fiction about lesbian characters is very like dour and very sterile almost. I don't know. Maybe that's just because it's not made by queer people, but that's another story. But Juliet Takes a Breath was like, it was sad and it was real and it was intense and it took a serious look at identity, but it wasn't hopeless like I felt so many other pieces of queer fiction are. So that was one that really made me feel like, okay, there are books out there that can speak to me on this level. So highly recommend Juliet Takes a Breath.
I'll second that recommendation.
We've all added it to our list. It is on Hoopla as a comic book or a graphic novel, for those of you who are wondering. Great option, always available. Just a little shout out to Hoopla, but I can go.
I love Hoopla.
Hoopla is amazing. I don't know why we don't talk about Hoopla more often. It took me literally coming to work at this library to figure out what Hoopla was, and I will never ever unsee that, and I love it. But I think my first interaction with a character who was gay was, I think, Wally Lamb's We Are Water, and that one is fully general fiction. It was a phenomenal book, but it wasn't necessarily the best light, because she had a family and a husband, and I think they'd been together for her kids were all grown, they're all adults, they had all moved out, and she ended up leaving her husband for a woman. And I think the journey was important for the family, because that's what you kind of see is like their journey, like through their mom leaving and what that does to their family and all that kind of stuff. But I don't remember, because this is a couple of years ago, I think, I don't remember it being necessarily the best depiction, because they obviously there's a lot of negativity around her leaving and like her kids not understanding her life. So I think for me, the first positive experience was actually last year when I read, I have to read it because I always forget, The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. Yeah, I'm going to bring it up. I love it. I was not a romance reader at all. I was mostly general fiction, horror, thrillers for a lot of times. And so this was my very first interaction with historical romance specifically, and it was a beautiful story. I absolutely adored it. There was diversity and women who didn't just, there's, I think one girl in it already knows that she's attracted to women, and the other one that she meets down the road learns as she goes along like what her feelings are, and kind of figuring out herself. And like for me, like I identify with that a lot because, you know, I mean, for them, they don't have the depiction at all. It's just historical, like it's like the 1700s. That's not a thing. Everyone is just really close friends. And to see her go through the process that she had to go through to figure out what she wanted in life was really beautiful to me. And it honestly just made me fall in love with historical romances. But it's so difficult to find stories like this in historical romances. Typically you'll see gay men a lot of times, like those ones seem to be very popular. And I
White
swear, yeah,
Mhm.
and I think Mal, you're the one who actually got Jacqueline to buy the book,
I
right?
still haven't read it.
Oh, are you kidding me? There's a second
It's
one.
incredible.
I know.
Yeah.
I was too stoked
Karen
when I read
keeping
it.
up with Waspish Widows.
I mean, it literally got me into reading historical romance, and I've never looked back. It's been, I guess, over a year now since I've been reading romance. And as everyone here on the podcast can attest, I talk a lot about romance. So for it to take that, to be able to see that representation, to see their feelings, to see how they explore them, like in a romance that is happy, was so beautiful. And I absolutely adored it. So I 100% recommend it because it is really a phenomenal book.
It's on Hoopla now. Not to throw out Hoopla again, but hey, it's on Hoopla now.
Hoopla has everything. It even has Taylor Swift, which also my favorite.
Oh my
Just gonna
gosh.
drop
What
it.
about you, Bria?
The first book that I came across, I had never had like any experiences with it when I was younger. I actually was working at the archives when I found this book, and it was called Vice Versa. And it's a nonfiction book that takes a look at bisexuality and stuff like that. I had already known what my identity was at the time, but to actually have something to look at and learn about and understand the history behind it, it was a really impactful book for me at the time. And I came across it way later in my life as well.
That's awesome.
Sounds really cool.
I wrote it
These
down
are all
already.
such new titles. Yeah. I'm surprised I
Worth a
haven't
read.
read like all these. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, what the one that like really touched me, it was like at Whitby Library. I went to the teen section, and I think I had found like a book list on Goodreads of like LGBTQIA reads or whatever, and I picked it up and I took it upstairs and I sat by the window and I just read it the entire afternoon because I was too scared to bring it home. I didn't want anyone to pick it up and be like, "Why are you reading this?" Anyways. It's called The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily Danforth. It is, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It was a thick one, but it was really cool because it went through probably from the protagonist being about 12 years old to her being, I don't know, maybe 16. And at the time, I think I was 15 or 16 when I read it. So reading the bits about her when she was younger, at first it felt kind of weird, but then eventually it was like, oh, this is just like memories, essentially. You know, these things all happen to me just in different ways. And it's a really sad book. You know, I won't get into it, but it definitely is one that revolves around queer trauma, which is something I'm trying to avoid because that's not really healthy, and it's not really fair that that's what a lot of the selections were and still are. But they turned it into a movie, and that one's still really close to my heart. It's a really great book, and I would really recommend it. Yeah, but Bria, you talked about while working at the archives. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I brought a prop. So they put out a book recently called Out North. And it's just like, it has a little bit of the stuff that they have at their own archives, most of the time you do need an appointment to do like research there, but we have this in our collection if anybody's looking to actually find a comprehensive list of what goes on there and history of the archives and stuff like that. But I worked as a cataloger there for a bit, and it's the most incredible place to me, the most incredible place to work ever. It's mostly volunteer run. They put on programs and guided tours, and actually their websites, they just updated it. It's a really good resource to look at as well, but they have everything there. They've got music by queer artists, movies, books of all sorts, like so many different books on all sorts of different topics, from sexual health to the history of LGBTQ2 plus initiatives in Toronto and all sorts of stuff like that. But my favorite collection was the art and artifacts section. They have so many things from drag queens that they wore at like pinnacle event. That's one of my favorite things, was a big tutu that one of the famous Toronto drag queens wore. It's really cool. They put out all sorts of stuff on display, so it's awesome. And the people there are so diverse. They have such a wide range of experiences, and they tackle a lot of issues and collect a lot of materials that most libraries you would never be able to find the kind of stuff there. So it's a great resource for somebody who's exploring or is questioning or is looking to figure out the history of what queerism is in Canada and how it's impacted all of us there. They're in a heritage home in Toronto. It's a beautiful little place, and they go all out and about all the time, and they have these fantastic, like they have walking tours. They'll do like the you can go and you can visit the actual place, see all the cool artifacts, see all the beautiful photographs, and often they'll put on music and movies, and they have a gala every year. It's a really awesome place, and it's a super, super comprehensive and great resource for anybody that's interested in this sort of topic.
That's awesome.
I think a lot of people just don't know that it's out there. Like, I didn't even know that it was a thing until I think Ashlyn was like, oh, Bria has worked in the queer archives. And I was like, I'm sorry, there's a queer archive somewhere and no one's told me about it. Like, I think a lot of these places, like, you just don't know. And then like, once you become part of that world, you start to know. I mean, like the library world and the archive world, like I'm taking a class in the summer called Queer Glamour or Clear Glam. So sorry, it's like literally it stands for like galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And I'm like, okay, fair. We're going with glam. Okay, I love it. But a lot of these things, I honestly just don't know. I don't know if it's me, like not looking for resources or what, but like this sounds like such a phenomenal place, and I want to visit right now. And it's a pandemic, and I can't.
Literally, that's the first place on the list after. But okay, Shelby, I feel like you bring up a really common theme to being queer is a lot of information you just have to find yourself. I feel like there's so many things that I just know about because of other queer people who have told me. It's interesting because it's almost a very word of mouth community in a way. I think that's just like a function of like the way our society works. Like even though we talk about, you know, like inclusion and everything, like that's, I don't know, sometimes it doesn't always translate into action, and that's really, yeah. I was actually listening to a podcast today talking about like trans inclusion in libraries. So I thought maybe we could talk about that topic for a bit. Also, the podcast, I want to shout it out. It's so good. It's all things libraries, and it's called Organizing Ideas. It's amazing, and it's available.
Right, same.
I'll put it in the description too. But it's a really cool podcast. But I think it's really important to talk about when we're talking about queerness, not just to talk about sexuality, but to talk about gender as well. So something we started doing in our library, and I think this is a really small thing, but a really important thing, is putting pronouns in like email signatures. That's been great because for me, I use she, they, and I'm non-binary. So like having that there is really important to me because like it's, I don't know, like obviously I hate the language of like preferred pronouns. Like, no, that's simply no, go away. That's not really right. But it's really good for me because like the emails are like a good way to like signify that without having to, I don't know, come out to people. And honestly, I don't really care for coming out myself. I don't know. I just, whatever. I'm just me and I don't really care. But I know that like it's taken me a long time to get there. But
I just want to say we also have them on our name tags too. So like when you're in the library and
oh,
you
I don't
see
have a name tag.
That was my idea, actually.
Okay. Oh, I love
Hey.
that. Thank you, Brea,
Love it.
because it's so important to the public to see
No
us
problem.
and see that on us, right? To right there, to know that it's normalized. All of us, almost all of us, I think, have it, but it's also on our name tags. And I remember, I think we added them like last summer, right? I think when we did the emails, and I literally went in and made my own name tag back up so I could put my pronouns. So I was like, this is such a phenomenal idea, because not only are you seeing it in an email, but when we're with the public, you're seeing it as well. But go on.
And I don't know about how you guys feel, but I feel like every queer person that I've talked to, like libraries and public spaces like that are really important to the queer community. And I know a lot of the friends that I made throughout my life, I've made like communing in library spaces and, you know, like discussing books. And it's so important to feel seen in books. And I feel like people who read are just generally kinder, because you have a broader perspective when you read books, because you're opening yourself up to a whole bunch of different viewpoints. So I think it's really important that libraries also sort of have that feeling of being a safe space for everyone. And I think so I think it's really cool that we're doing those things, like putting the pronouns into the name tags and the emails and everything. But like, I feel like there's, you know, I'm sure there's more that we could be doing, but I think it's really important that we're all on the same page. And I think we are working toward that as a library, like trying to create a culture of understanding, I think, a little bit more. But I don't know what steps we can take for the trans community. And I can't speak on it not being trans myself. But yeah, I feel like libraries are an important space for that to happen, I guess is my point.
So a lot of the times in libraries, there's a performance of neutrality that kind of says we are neither pro nor anti anything. But I think there's an evolution that's happening right now. A lot of places are trying to move past that. So I think one of the things that I've taken away, because there's been so many instances of trans folks speaking in libraries and using those platforms, and you know, it's hard with library policies and it's hard to change policies. But one of the things that I heard and I took away from, you know, stories about this is libraries need to be made so that a transphobic speaker would not feel welcome in a library and not the other way around. So we need to actively show support for the queer and trans community. So like anything from book displays, and not just during Pride Month, it's important to care about communities all months of the year, and that goes for every community. So Black History Month is not just February, you know, that content and that support needs to be there all year round. So I think it's just really important to make the space, you know, a place where everyone can be celebrated all year round, and it's just not even a possibility that someone with a platform like that would even want to enter the space.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of easy ways to do that, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to revolve around like programming specifically, like having your readers advisory list right at the front. I've recently been studying other libraries for school. And I was just looking through their programs and events, and they do a blog post, this one library that I was studying. And in it, like they constantly have blog posts, they get updated like almost every day. And just literally looking at it for my presentation that I did yesterday, they had an art kit that you could get that was for Black women leaders. It was all about powerful Black women leaders. And then underneath it, it was literally like top 10 LGBT plus movies to watch on your next movie night. Like it's normalized, it's right there. Like I was scrolling through and it was constantly just diverse and easy. And like once it's part of your online presence, because online presence is a huge part, right? That's where we see a lot of our media coverage, and how we talk to our public. Like having it right there and visible is so important. And I know we have pins at the library that we wear, which is another visible thing, that it's on our physical bodies that shows you that we're accepting. But I think online is just as important as physically too, because a lot of people, that's their first gateway to the library is our webpage.
Especially right now.
Yes. Yeah, it's a huge part, and it doesn't have to be difficult. It really isn't. It's literally just part of our lives, and it shouldn't be treated as something special like for 1 month. It should be all the time, because I mean, right here, right now, we have 5 people sitting here doing this podcast who clearly identify with this demographic, like, and that's just within the people who work in a library system, right? Like it might not be that they necessarily feel like they belong within the community, but they identify with it, they're allies, whatever it is. Like we're all here, we're here to support it. And I think a big part of that is this movement of, you know, a different generation coming through. Not to say that the older generations don't, I think they do. The older generations have been amazing, but we're getting a real push of new people coming in with new ideas and kind of being like, no, this is who we are, this is what we believe. And I firmly believe that the youngest generation that's coming with us, that's coming at us right now, is some of the queerest people that we've ever had. Okay,
100%.
like 100%. They're visible, they're taught it in schools, like they see it in social media. Like it's not this hidden thing anymore. Like it's so visible because of the internet, and it's so easy to create a space that's welcoming by just having things visible.
And just to asterisk that, it's not that there's more queer people because there's some crazy trend going on. It's because we're being told that it's safe to be ourselves, so we no longer feel like we have to hide it. So just to make sure that's clear.
Thank you.
I know that's no, I know that's what you meant, Shelby.
Yeah, that's what totally. I mean.
Yeah, I think we would have to wrap up in a minute, so we could all go around and say what we're reading next.
Hey, hello all. For those of you who are returning to this podcast once again, it is me, Shelby, who reads basically all fantasy and romance. So I'm really trying to do right by you guys and to really expand myself. And honestly, it's better for me to read other things too. So I'm doing my best. So this one I'm very excited about because it was just International Women's Day. This one's called These Women, and it follows 3 separate women I think they're in Los Angeles. I have not read the book yet, but they're each part of like a marginalized demographic. There's a woman who is a dancer, and another woman who is living on the street, and I believe a gritty cop. And then there's a murder that must be solved. But it follows these 3 women and their lives and kind of what's driving them together. I have not read it yet, but I'm super excited. I've heard really good things. These Women by, sorry, the sticker is covering up her first name.
Ivy?
Is it Ivy? It kind of looks like Ivy. Ivy Pachoda, I think. Sorry if I butchered that last name. We will add it to our list, but I'm very excited to read it. And that's me.
So the next thing that I'm going to be reading is Agnes Murderess. It's going to be very hard to see. It's a massive graphic novel. Well, massive for me. But I'm pretty stoked about it. It's got some serial killer vibes. It's got some creepy vibes. It's by Sarah Leavitt. And it's all in black and white, and it's all hand-drawn, and I'm quite excited for that.
It's gorgeous.
Hold on it. I'm so excited.
So I just finished my book like an hour and a half ago. I was reading it on lunch, and it's so good. It's called Punching the Air, and it's written by one of the exonerated 5 from the Central Park jogger case. I don't know if y'all know about that, but you should look it up. Listeners, if you don't know about it, it's too much to go into, but you should look it up. Anyway, this is a fantastic book, and it's about a young man who's sent to juvenile detention center for a crime that he didn't commit. And it's all written in verse because I love me some YA in verse. And it also includes some illustrations, and it's fantastic. Like it's a really, really cool book. Highly recommend. It's a very intense read though, so make sure you're in the right space for it. And then the next one I'm going to be reading, I think, is Mooncakes, which is a fantasy queer graphic novel. So I'm very excited about it.
It's
I
so
love
good.
mooncakes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm so excited.
It's so good.
I can't wait to read that.
A change of pace.
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah.
Okay, Brea, what are you reading next?
Alrighty, so I just got this book in the mail, and it's called Carnal Knowledge by Zoe Ligon, and it's sex education that you didn't get in school. So it actually focuses on a lot of different queer topics, and it has some beautiful photographs in it as well. Pretty cool. But
Wow. Oh my
it's
gosh.
extremely sex positive, and it goes into all sorts of wonderful things about what you might not have learned and what you need to know in order to be safe.
I love that. That's amazing.
She's a really cool author, by the way. She's awesome.
Oh, that looks amazing. I'm adding so much to my list.
Oh, same.
I'm currently reading, gotta finish it, The Barren Grounds by David A. Robertson. It is so good so far. It's a middle grade fiction. It's fantasy, and I actually got to meet the author on Zoom on Tuesday. Dave Robertson. He is Cree, and he came to my school for a class visit, and he talked about writing the book. It's actually a trilogy, part of the Misawa saga. It's really cool. He kind of said like it's always going to be compared to Narnia because it's kind of a take on that story, but it's just incredible. I haven't read middle grade in years, but I'm really happy I picked it up, and yeah, I'd really recommend it.
I would just like to say that the two people who never bring fantasy or romance have both bought a fantasy.
Well,
I'm very proud.
Thank you.
I feel
We
called
rubbed
out.
up on you. Although that
Well,
one
finally.
actually does sound phenomenal. And I love meeting
Mhm.
authors because you really get to like sit down and like talk to them. And clearly his story is important, but God, meeting authors and getting to talk to them, doing an author talk. We have so many author talks at the library, even during quarantine. We do them all through, I think it's Zoom, I'm assuming, or
WebEx or
WebEx, yeah. You can still go to those, and I 100% recommend them. I got to sit into a few last year, and our author visits are truly amazing. They pick just the most amazing people to come and talk, and I mean, why not? Why not get to meet the author of a book, right? Especially if it's somebody who's from Canada, living in and around Durham or Ontario. Like, representing our people is so important. So definitely check out our author visits. There should be another one coming up soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We absolutely loved talking with Mel and Brea today, especially the queer archives, and being involved within the library is so important, and to get these voices is amazing. And plus we love to showcase all the people that work with us because we love them all and think they're amazing at what they do, and are really part of our team. So thank you guys both for joining us today. And don't forget to check out all of our programs and our resources on our website. We have so many programs happening. So we should have had a From Book to Table for Kids that came out during our March break. I know our March break is now being moved to April, but we're still kind of doing the same thing. So check out that. Check out our YouTube channel. We have so many things. If you're already watching us on YouTube right now, head on over there, see what we've got. We've got lots of crafts and, adult activities, and there's some mindfulness things coming up as well. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you in April. Okay? Have fun. Bye.
Bye.